over the heath, there was an ancient crumbling waterhouse where the entire estate's water system was managed. Believe me, we thought it was a miracle how anything that old and manky could keep and pump out any water. But it did. It was made with bricks, with a black slate roof and iron doors, although at the time of this incident, it was just a shadow of its former self, and didn't have any doors. The windows were all smashed in by generations of kids throwing rocks and stones at them. It was there when my mama and her siblings were kids and played over the heath. And they all told us it spooked them and their mates as it did us. It was a really hot day one summer in the school holidays. The older boys were at home for some reason, and all the younger cousins, me included, were being little brats. So the boys said they would take us all blackberry picking to keep us quiet. Mama agreed gratefully. The boys were really responsible and mature at 16, 17, and 18. They babysat for us younger kids all the time, so we all knew the rules of staying close to the boys and doing what they told us. And so, a half hour later, everyone had their fruit buckets, and we were off. There were 5 of us younger kids. We were all really excited as blackberry picking was a great family favorite activity, and our Gran's blackberry pies were the best. Gran's house led directly onto the back of the heath. There was a fence with a gap at the end. One of my older cousins passed me through to the other, then lifted my tiny wheelchair over the fence. The other kids were through in seconds, and we were away again. On our way to our destination, the older boys told us spooky stories, as they always did, half because they liked scaring us, and half because we all used to beg them too. There was nothing more terrifying than a story from my cousins H or B. They were masters, and so believable. We loved it. We all stopped talking when we came to the Waterhouse. Nobody ever dared to speak around or near the Waterhouse, not even the older boys. For something so mundane, it always looked, and still does, so eerie. There was a second fence to get through before we reached our beloved blackberry field. But this time, as we squeezed through the gap in the fence, we were all more somber as we remembered the old wife's tale urban legend that we all knew about the Waterhouse. The story goes, once in the early 1960s, there was a gang of bank robbers. They were local to the area and were really nasty pieces of work. Their expertise was terrorizing bank customers and staff alike before grabbing and shooting anything that moved. They did several jobs without getting caught, but they really messed up a particular job, and a sweet 19-year-old trainee bank clerk was shot dead, and 5 more people were seriously injured. One of the gang was also shot dead, along with the nastiest member of the gang being seriously wounded in the crossfire. It is said that the remaining gang members escaped with just a few $100s and made their way over to the heath and hid out in the Waterhouse. It was newish at that time and was a perfect hideaway for the murderers. There was a lot of contention and stress between the remaining gang. Months, although it was never proven how, the bodies of all 3 of the remaining gang members were discovered rotting away in the Waterhouse 6 months later. A few years after, the weird stuff and creepy noises started occurring near and around the Waterhouse. Mysterious, hairy figures were glimpsed moving stealthily amongst the pipes and wires. A dank, moldy, rotten smell like aging river weeds was always smelt around the area of the Waterhouse, and eerie wails and menacing murmurs could be heard day and night. In the late 70s, there was a spate of mysterious deaths of homeless people who would shelter over the heath not too far from the Waterhouse. There was nothing to ever link the deaths to the Waterhouse, but the locals soon started giving the Waterhouse and surrounding area a wide berth because of the creepy history and dark reputation, and that left the Waterhouse abandoned and in disrepair. That's what we knew of the Waterhouse's dark history. That is why we were so wary and anxious to get away from it as quickly as possible. When we were all through the gap in the fence further away from the Waterhouse, us younger cousins built up enough courage to glance over at the building of ill repute before being rounded up by the older boys. B put me in my wheelchair again, and we set off to the blackberry field. We soon arrived at the field, where some other local kids we knew were already there, and we spent a nice afternoon picking and eating the juicy, sweet blackberries and splashing in the river. And soon the sun was getting low, and it was time for home. Our journey home was much like the one there. We were still bantering, laughing, and the older boys were still winding us up slightly, but being as it was getting later, we were feeling wearier and slightly subdued. When we reached the fence before the Waterhouse, the air felt slightly too close, like before a thunderstorm. The youngest of the 3 older boys got me out of my wheelchair so that B could lift it over the fence. The other kids were already on the other side of the fence with H and B. A suddenly said to his brother in a low, guarded voice,
"Something moved at the back of there, bruv."
B just looked at him sideways. Out of the boys, A was the most likely one to pull a stunt or wind anyone up for a laugh, but A was straight-faced. A said,
"I'm going to have a look,"
passing me through to B and squeezing past us all.
"Wait up, A, we've got the..."
Having put me in my wheelchair, B had moved forward towards his brother when we all heard a shriek out in horror and disgust, and the 2 boys moved back quickly. H, having already taken me out of my wheelchair again, had told everyone to run, and we did, B picking up my tiny wheelchair, folding it up while running. A grabbing the other 2 kids' hands and following B and H running with me on his shoulders, holding my other cousin's hands. We ran and ran. A kept saying,
"Don't look back! Don't look back!"
I did, but saw nothing. We didn't stop till we got to the fence which leads back to the road on the estate, and we could actually see civilization again. We were all completely exhausted, especially the older boys. Before we slipped through the fence to the road, B, holding himself up by the railings, asked,
"What did you see, A?"
"Yellow eyes, hairy face!"
All of us younger kids began to panic and scream. H had to calm us all down. He said that we were safe and it would be all right, but we all wanted to get as far away from the Waterhouse as possible. When we got home, we all looked bedraggled and slightly nervy. Mama and my auntie noticed this and asked the boys what was wrong. H just said that we just got spooked by an old drunk man in the bushes looking for golf balls to sell, and as that was quite common over the heath, Mama and my auntie just gave us kids a pep talk and hugged us. We never did tell my mama or my auntie the truth about the yellow eyes and hairy face, or find out what it actually was, but us kids didn't go near the Waterhouse for a long time after.
I've explored many abandoned buildings over the past 2 years, but the scariest was an abandoned mall I explored in the UK. It was late at night and we had to do a lot to get into the shopping center as it was locked up tight. We had to somehow get on the roof through a multi-story car park. There was a 10-foot wall in our way, so we had to pile up things we found to get over it. Once we were in, it was normal routine exploration. We explored almost all of the mall. When we went downstairs to the ground floor, we heard radio noise from an office.
Don't skip this.
We thought it was security, so we walked back up to where we came in. As we were walking onto the roof, my mate stopped us and said that there was a guy blocking our exit. He was wearing all black and had no security badge on. So we hid for a bit, waiting for him to leave, thinking he was just smoking a cigarette. But when we came back to see if he had left, he was still there, this time holding a metal pipe. We instantly knew there were no security guards and that there was probably something they were hiding in the building, and so they were looking for us. We went back down to the second floor and hid in a display window that was hidden from the rest of the floor. We were there for 20 minutes tops, but it felt like years. Our hearts were pounding throughout. We suddenly heard another man walking around our floor, dragging a piece of metal across the floor. At this point, we realized that we might have to either break out or fight our way out. My friend remembered that there was another door on the roof that would bypass the guy guarding the other route and would take us straight onto the car park. We decided this was the best plan to get out in one piece. We waited for the guy to leave our floor and decided to make a break for it to find the door. We couldn't rush or run as we risked being heard by the men, so we quietly snuck around the back rooms where we finally reached what we believed was our escape, but it was blocked by debris. At this point, I didn't care about being heard, so I started pulling the debris off, and my mate kicked the door open. We ran across the roof. I have no idea if the person saw us because I was occupied with getting the heck out of there. We got into this empty car park and made our way down to the bottom, where we saw another gang member was sitting in a blacked-out Ford Transit, probably waiting for us to come out of the car park, so our ordeal wasn't over. At this point, we had enough, so we ran up one floor and found a fire exit to the outside. This fire exit was screwed shut because the car park was also abandoned. So I launched myself through the door, which luckily flew open, and we got out into the main road and went onto the street to blend into the nightlife. Less than a minute later, the van drove out, probably seeing that we had gotten out. We had narrowly escaped this gang. No idea what they were planning to do if they had caught us. That day shook me, but I'm still exploring, just being more careful with places I choose to explore.
Don't skip this.